Welcome. Hello, everyone. My name is Tiara Eggleston Stewart. I'm one of the co-chairs for MRPA's Training and Education Committee. We also have with us today Sarah Morgan. She's from the committee and she's going to be assisting with facilitating today's session. So before we get into the session, I do want to turn it over to our Executive Director, Mr. Chuck Montre, to share some information with the group.
Thank you, Tara, and good morning, everybody, or afternoon now, one after. Really excited to see so many people at this session. You know, oftentimes TR sessions aren't as well attended as we would like, so great to see everybody. I just want to say, remind everybody that our conference coming up in April is going to be virtual, but we really want to try to get a lot of people to this conference. It's a unique opportunity to get some additional people. So what we've done is we've made an offer for agencies that for every person that they have paid registered, we will let them have 2 additional free registrations. So the directors have that list now, and hopefully each department is working on filling their free slots. But I would encourage you, if you do want to join us, to reach out to your director and see if you can get on that list. That's it. Thanks, Tara.
All right, no problem at all. Thank you, Chuck. All right, so I'd like to welcome the group to our Lunch and Learn webinar. We have about 67 people registered from agencies across the state, and we're looking forward to a great training. Today's session, Don't You Forget About Me, Inclusion Are You Really In, will be led by Marybeth Dugan and Genevieve Jennai of the Program Access Office with Montgomery Parks. But before we get started, I just want to remind the group of a few things. Please mute yourselves unless answering a question that is posed by our presenters. This will be an interactive session and you are encouraged to participate where appropriate. We ask that you turn off your video cameras so your attention can be focused on today's presentation. This is a CEU eligible session. Because today's session is an hour and a half, the session will provide learners with 0.15 CEUs. To apply for and earn CEU credit, participants must attend the entire session and complete and submit the post-session evaluation. On the evaluation, you must include your name and email address associated with your session registration today. Once the evaluation is received, MRPA will compare the evaluation to the participant list and send the CEU code to participants via email. The online evaluations for those seeking CEU credit must be submitted by this Friday, February 26th at 5 p.m. Again, it's important that you attend the entire session and submit the post-session evaluation, including your name and email address. Without this information, MRPA will be unable to issue the CEUs. And with that, I'll turn it over to Marybeth and Genevieve to proceed with their session.
Thank you, Tara. And good afternoon, everybody. Again, thank you for being here on this beautiful day with us in February. Hopefully, we'll have some more spring weather like this, and we can get outside today after our training and enjoy some of this great weather. Before we start today, we'd like to take a minute and honor and remember a very, very good friend of ours and colleague, Laura Weatherald. Laura passed away on Friday, and she has left a remarkable footprint in all of us. She was an avid leader in the field of parks and recreation. She had a boisterous laugh that you heard it before you even saw her. If you heard it in a classroom or you heard it in a building, you knew it was going to be a great day. She had a bear hug that just kept you safe and sound. And we just wanted to remember her today, because if those of you who didn't know Laura and maybe didn't know her history of parks and recreation, when she first started in the public parks and recreation field, she was a inclusion specialist for Montgomery Recreation. And then she helped develop that program. And then she moved on to Howard County Recreation and Parks, where she started inclusion in TR. So inclusion is very near and dear to her heart, and it's appropriate today, of all days, to remember her and thank her for being our trailblazer in inclusion. So if we can take us a few minutes to remember and honor Laura in your own silent way, then we'll start our presentation. Okay, thank you all so much. So let's talk about why we're here today. We have 3 objectives, and you may have your own reasons on why you joined today, but today we're going to cover these top 3. We're going to discuss the meaning and the history of exclusion, inclusion, and the impact it's had on society. And that's very important to know and very important to understand where we were, where we are now, and where we need to go. We're going to list some strategies for you to use to be effective when you apply them to your leadership and you're developing your programs. So think about that when you're always in the forefront of developing your programs. I want you to think about inclusion in the forefront of all of those types of programs and different accessibility needs. Number 3, we're going to identify and describe disabilities so to increase your awareness and your knowledge, and that would help you when you're doing your programs and you're arranging your program needs. So you may have some reasons why you joined. So if you'd like to just shout them out, unmute yourself for a minute and just shout out or put in the chat why you're here today. And then we can see what people are doing and why they came. Anyone? Thank you, Dr. Mo. Learning from the best. There's a lot of us who are ready to do that for you. Learn more.
Marybeth, it's Paul Magnus in Parks in Harford County Parks and Rec. I'm the deputy director for our department, and honestly, therapeutic recreation is the one area I know the least about. So that's why I'm here today, for you guys to educate me more.
That's terrific. Great. Thank you so much. New strategies for programming, great. Megan, thank you. Anyone else? Always learning, very good. Thanks, Kelsey. We love you too.
Thank you.
Okay, well, good. Let's move on then. Let's talk about some history. We all know this picture. We all know who this person is. For those of you who may need a refresher course, this is Rosa Parks, a very brave, brave woman. She brought awareness to the forefront of our country. And they say this woman got very tired. She was tired, in fact, historically tired of being denied equality and feeling excluded. So when Rosa Parks sat down on this bus, in the front of the bus, where she was not allowed to sit, they told her to move to the back of the bus. And she said no. She was told to go to her place, and she said no. They arrested her, and they brought her to the jail. And this is where history started. It was started because historically she was tired of being excluded and tired of being not heard. So she had sat down and thereby stood up for inclusion. Another powerful cry for inclusion. Another cry we hear, and we're going to talk about mostly today, are the people with disabilities, because they are also crying for inclusion and for it to be accepted. So let's go to the next slide and talk about a couple of terms: stereotype and discrimination. So when you hear the word stereotype, think for a minute what that might look like for you. So I'm going to pick on me for a minute. Okay, I'm Irish. Stereotypically, what do you think about me and the Irish? All right, think about that for a minute. I hear it, I know it. Stereotype, okay? Discrimination. Think about that word for a minute too. And as we go to the next slide, let's talk about how this terminology really is the meaning of this. So stereotypes are a preconceived notion, especially about a group of people. So when you were thinking about me and the Irish, I'm sure you had a stereotype, typical vision in your head about what we kind of look like, okay? Let's talk about discrimination. The unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people or things. So I know in our long lives, in the long heritage and culture of our country, discrimination unfortunately still exists. And I'm sure we've all have been discriminated at one time or another in our lives. And the feelings are just horrible. And discrimination is a learned behavior. Because think about this, think about children who are playing in a sandbox on the playground. They're boys and girls playing together. They're not concerned about what they look like, how they act, or where they came from. They just want to have fun and play together and be together, okay? But, you know, things happen in their lives and they start changing, and this learned behavior becomes relevant in their life. And this is where we want to stop doing this. We want to stop doing this because, next slide, you'll see these two words cause exclusion and segregation, right? Look at the left, that big colorful left circle. Inside, they're all the same colors of dots. Let's say they're people. On the outside, there's all different colors of dots. People trying to get in to that group of people. Exclusion. They're not in. They're not in. Let's move to the right where you see segregation. There's a group of people who are all together, those same color dots. They're all together in a group, like maybe a group of people with disabilities who want to come in and be with that group. That's segregation, trying to get in. They're all together as one group, but they're trying to be included. So let's talk about disabilities. What happens in the world of disability and disability, people with disabilities? What happens here? What about their exclusion and inclusion? Look at this picture. The child in the wheelchair and their group of people over there, totally excluded. And let's do a little bit more history about disabilities and how people got this exclusion. Way back in the 1700s, folks, and it's still very, very vulnerable today. There was a hospital in Pennsylvania. It was the first hospital to create a special section for the treatment of people with disabilities. And these patients who were in this hospital were chained. They were chained to the basement, and the community came and paid to see the freaks, okay? So people with disabilities were seen as having a divine judgment for wrongdoing. They were a burden on society. They were abnormal. They were evil or sinister. They were objects of ridicule. So you may remember too, maybe growing up in the school system where you had children with disabilities were separated from your classroom, okay? So there's a story that I want to tell you. I had a brother. He was born in 1964. And when he was born, he had a disability that they labeled him as mentally retarded. That was the word that they used in 1964. And the doctors told my parents, put him in an institution because he'll amount to nothing. Well, that wasn't going to happen. But my 24 and 25-year-old parents were now thrown into this world of the unknown. There were no laws. There were no help for him anywhere. But they brought him home, and he was included in everything that we did. He went to school. He went to a special education center. He played ball with us in the street. We went to the pool. He was coming with us. He grew up as a terrific athlete. He was very, very, very competitive, loved his basketball, loved the Washington football team. He became a member of society. He had a job. He voted. And could you imagine if he had been put into an institution because he'd amount to nothing? Well, that wasn't going to happen. So what happened after all this stuff was happening throughout the years, 60s and 70s, there was a movement, a big movement. Parents, self-advocates, the people in the front row you see here now, the movement was equal rights and human rights for individuals with disabilities. There were grassroots campaigns, there were sit-ins, there were peaceful demonstrations, but they weren't going down without a fight. You see in the front row there, the woman with the baseball cap on, her name is Judy Heumann, and she is a leader in the field of inclusion and disability awareness. And on the right, the gentleman in the hat, that gentleman is Justin Dart. He is known as the godfather of the ADA. Now, these were huge movements. And if anyone has ever seen the movie or the documentary called Crip Camp, please, I recommend you watch it. It's on Netflix if you have access. It is a wonderful, wonderful tribute to the beginning of time to now and the movement of disability and awareness and inclusion. And these two folks are in it. And it starts with them going to camp. So the name again is CRIP, C-R-I-P, Camp on Netflix. Thanks, Jen. So the movement goes forward and forward, and guess what? The next slide shows you in 1990, the ADA was born. 1990, that's not very far ago, 30 years, okay? So you'll see that George Bush signed the ADA into law. It went into law on July 26, 1990, and there's Justin Dart right there, the man with the hat, the godfather of the ADA. What a day! What a day for equal rights and for disabilities. This became part of the civil rights. The ADA is part of the civil rights. Along with the ADA comes inclusion. So here we are. Inclusion is a philosophy. Inclusion means we want everyone to embrace the idea that everyone has something of value to offer and contribute. And everyone has a right to belong, right? We're all here to belong and to be together and to fit in. Some agencies have a dedicated office for inclusion and therapeutic recreation, and some agencies don't. But we're here today to tell you that we know we can help you if you don't have a dedicated office on how to find those kind of services, how we can help you in promoting and embracing inclusion in your departments and agencies. So in order for you to, to think about when we're talking about internal and internally for our staff, you know, one of the things that we talk about and deal with all the time is barriers. So inclusion, there are barriers. There are physical barriers, programmatic barriers, and the hardest barrier to overcome are attitudinal barriers. Those are behaviors that we have to overcome. There's resistance, there's fear. I don't know how to talk with people with disabilities. How do I do that? Okay, we're gonna talk about that a little more. So externally, when we are thinking about inclusion in our programs and activities in our parks and our amenities, what are we doing externally to invite people in? Right? We also want to remember and tell you that inclusion is actually a choice. So we have the philosophy of everyone's invited and we want people to be there. But let's think about that for a minute. Inclusion is a choice. A person can make a choice to be included, right? I'm gonna think about Tommy Dugan again, my brother. Tommy loved basketball. So he signed up for a therapeutic recreation basketball program with his peers. Skills, developing skills, socialization, having fun. He was so competitive. He was like, I'm gonna make all the baskets, I'm gonna win. That was Tommy's game. That was Tommy's really big, huge sport he loved to play. So when inclusion came in, we took Tommy down to the local community center And we said, hey, Tommy, let's go into the gym and see the 30 and over basketball program. Tommy was 32. He qualified to be in the class. But when he looked out at all those guys that were 10 feet tall, and Tommy was 5 feet tall, he didn't feel comfortable in that realm. He thought, oh my gosh, there's Michael Jordan's in here. There's Magic Johnson's in here. There's Larry Bird's in here. That's not my peer. That's not my peer. So Tommy said, no, I don't want this. And he walked out of the gym. And he went back to his therapeutic specialized camp and train program. And that's okay, because inclusion is a choice for people to make. So let's talk about that for a minute. It's going back to these circles again, okay? Integration, okay, so there's that group of all look-alike dots. We have that group of people coming in who are all different color dots, and they're kind of integrated, right? But they're kind of not hanging out with the people who look the same. Oh, they're here, but we're not really enjoying and welcoming them into the fold. On the right side, though, that is total inclusion. We have all the folks in there learning and growing and being together. And that's what we strive for, right? There's also, for those of you who would like to know, there is a Parks for Inclusion template. And there is on the national level right here, Parks for Inclusion. Our NRPA office has this inclusion policy that you all can actually get. It's a template, and you can develop your own inclusion manual, your policy, removing your barriers. And it talks about all kinds of folks who need to be welcomed to your parks. People with disabilities, people with socioeconomic backgrounds, multicultural backgrounds, cognitive disabilities, the LGBTQ communities. They're all members who want to be included. And if you go to NRPA and you can actually get this document from them, they are happy to share it with you so you can actually start your inclusion policies. Okay, let's go a little bit to what our department does. We're from Montgomery Parks, part of the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. And when the law at ADA came into law, we already had a lot of these things in place in our department and our commission, in the commission. But one of the things that our commission did do is send out notices to every single employee. And the notices are really good notices and explain that the commission follows the ADA. We welcome people, we want to include people, and we want to have barrier-free programs, amenities, and parks. So this was an ADA compliance notices that came out to all of our folks. And that starts, guys, with a welcome, coming to our facilities, and having accessible parking, for example, okay? So here, this is part of our access team in Montgomery Parks. We have the reserved parking with the van accessibility, the aisle, and the fine. And that's all you really need for your signs, okay, to be included. Long gone is the word handicapped, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. We want to take that out of our lingo, if you will. The universal sign is the chair that you see there. So those are very, very things to think about when you're thinking about inclusion, is how you are going to have access into your parks, your programs, your facilities. The next thing that we have to do is educate and train our internal staff. We need to get them ready, okay? Our department has a mandate that came from our executive officers. So our director and our deputies made it a mandate for every single parks employee to take the ADA and program access training. And we've trained over close to 1,700 employees now. Right here, you see our maintenance staff, and they're taking another training that we have, Emergency Action Plan. And this is for a training that we do for emergency preparedness and how to bring people with disabilities that are in your programs, in your facilities, to safe haven. Other trainings that we instill and that we invite people to come to in our department is disability awareness, communication, sensitivity awareness, autism sensitivity and sensory. So in our education and our training sessions, we review many important aspects. And one of the big important things that we talk about is person first language. So you might have heard this, you may have seen this already, but we use this type of language to be humane and empathetic, not sympathy. We are empathetic, okay? It references the person first. It doesn't focus on the disability or the diagnostic label. It is the person first. And as a professional, we embrace this in our department, and we hope that you do too when you go back to yours. So we see the person first. We want to get away from a lot of these unacceptable languages. You hear the word the disabled. As a community, when I think of the word disabled, I think of a broken down vehicle on the Beltway. Something's wrong with it. It doesn't work. That's not true. And people with disabilities, they have another way of doing something. However, I serve on the Commission on People with Disabilities in Montgomery County, and there's about 36 of us who serve on this commission for the county executive. And when we go around the room and introduce ourselves to people who are new, people who are have disabilities and use wheelchairs, or they're deaf or blind, they'll say, "Oh, my name is Matt, and I'm disabled." So he identifies himself as being disabled, and that's his right. I'm not going to tell him, say, "Oh, no, 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 you're a person in a wheelchair." No, no, no. That's how he identifies himself. So I just let that's their way of identifying. But in our situation, it's the person first. We don't want to say the word handicap anymore. It has a really bad connotation. Inclusion kid. Oh, he's an inclusion kid in one of my programs. Wheelchair bound. It's a person who uses a wheelchair. Crippled. Stroke victim. Confined to a wheelchair. An epileptic. A retard. That R word is never to be used. Idiot, lame, insane. You get what I mean. So the next video that we're going to see is a short 4-minute video that kind of hits home with what we're talking about here.
We need to talk about the R word. When people use the R word, it's usually not to describe someone who has a disability. It's used to describe someone who's inadequate.
Your daughter Chloe is retarded at directions.
Something that doesn't function correctly.
I think that transformer's retarded.
Something that's crazy.
My flow retarded, HB departed.
Or something that kids, just say.
It's really common with our kids and stuff. It's just like when they throw out the word, "Oh, that's so gay."
We hear this line of thinking all the time, but how does it hold up when presented to people who are actually affected by disabilities? This is Paul. Paul is a young man from Brooklyn who has Down syndrome, and this is Paul's mom, Margaret. So you're obviously very sensitive about people using the R word because your son has Down syndrome. But you know that when people are using the R word, they're not talking about your son directly.
Well, no, they're not talking about my son directly, but when they use the R word, it's in a very negative way. It's used to make fun of people, to ridicule. So it's hurtful.
But it's just like a harmless saying. It's like, "That's so gay."
But it's not a harmless thing. I mean, my son is Down syndrome and he's gay. Both those things would be hurtful and disrespectful to him.
Paul's family has made an effort not to label their son. As a result, he's been able to identify himself on his own terms. So, how's it going?
I'm fabulous, you?
I'm good. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Well, I am homosexual, and I feel fabulous about it.
Paul has been able to live a rich life full of music.
One of my favorite hobbies is karaoke.
Crushes.
One of my favorite actors is Darren Criss. I have a crush on him.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
Dreams.
I want to be a pop culture TV star.
Are you born to be a star?
Always.
And thanks to the support of his family, he doesn't let his disability define him.
My son was encouraged to do whatever he could do. He's very passionate about life and about what he wants to do with his life, and he goes about doing it.
I'm a Brooklyn diva. If you want to come out and express yourself, it's okay to be different.
Did you always find it easy to be different, or sometimes it was hard?
It's not that hard, just it felt great. I feel powerful.
Clearly, Paul is anything but inadequate or crazy or any of the other negative things we associate with the R word. And yet, when we use the word as an insult, it's hard to claim we're not referencing people like him. Intellectual disabilities are still the #1 thing associated with the R word. And if you spend time with any of the 6.5 million people living with intellectual disabilities or their families, it's clear that they're not comfortable with how casually the word is used in our culture.
Why are you constantly using a word like the R word as an insult?
The R word is a hateful word.
It made me feel like I wasn't compatible to what other people could do. And I never want to hear of that word again.
That's my concern with, use of the R word. People with developmental disabilities have feelings, they can be hurt, and you need to just maybe get to know them. Go out and learn for yourself.
So when is it okay to use the R word? If you stop and think about the implications of the word and what it means and who it reaches, it becomes easy to answer that question for yourself. Never.
So you see, Paul had a great support system and he had lots of opportunities, which is great for him and for his family. And this is where we can come in too, as a Recreation and Parks departments. So the most appropriate label is usually the ones people's parents had given them when they were born. And this cartoon kind of sums it up. And it says, so what do you want to be called? Handicapped, disabled, physically challenged. And the guy says, Joe would be fine. So let's talk about our next slide is, how do I start with having some inclusion in my programs? How do I keep that philosophy in the forefront of my programs and my facilities? So in our office, we have an outreach and collaborative effort, and a staff person, Jennai Blakely, who's in charge of inclusion, our inclusive events, as well as our outreach and collaboration. So what's really important with us is our networking that we do with our different agencies in our communities. Service providers, check your local service providers, the ARC. Every Mind is a big mental health association in our community. Down Syndrome Network, Autism Society. So these are a lot of different service providers that you can do collaborative and outreach events with. We go down to Annapolis and attend Developmental Disabilities Day in Annapolis, February, that first slide. The second slide is a sensory board. When we go out and we do our outreach, when we go out tabling, we bring that with us. So anybody can come up and see what it's like to have maybe autism or on the spectrum. It's a sensory driven board. You'll see there's our tabling. We go out tabling, we bring all kinds of goodies with us to give away, promotional items, our rack cards, we give out flyers, that kind of thing. And we're always doing activities and talking with people and bringing them into the fold And we work very closely with our public affairs office. So your PIO or your public affairs office are key in helping you to get out and collaborate. And if they're out there and they're promoting your agency or your department, join them in helping to spread the word about inclusion and everyone of all different abilities that were welcome into the fold. And speaking of welcome, our next slide shows you, we put welcome language, and this is important that you put welcome language on your promotional items. So flyers, guides, we just put a paragraph on there. We encourage and support participation of individuals with disabilities. And you contact our office if you would like to have a disability modification. We put our phone number, we use our relay number, and we also have the website. So here's something I want to talk to you about too. We talked about making the right choice, and inclusion is a choice. When we're talking with our parents and people who come to our tables when we're out, we talk about making the right choice in the right program. And looking at these two different documents, they say the exact same thing, okay? One on the right is the colorful, the flyer we hand out to people to talk about making the right choice and how we have that inclusion and inclusive programming and services. And the one on the middle one, that is actually a ADA compliant form. And I'm going to get to that in a minute, because one is we give to them, people can read, and one is on the website. And we want to make sure that people are reading about us and following us in a compliant atmosphere. And let's go to the next slide and I'll show you more about that. So there's an accessible document and an inaccessible document. These documents are the exact same thing. We did a timeline of our access team, and it's actually a beautiful document, and it's a beautiful piece. And it's one that could be hung up on a wall because it starts from where we started to where we are now, where we're going. So it's a beautiful document on the right, all those colors, all those different pictures, okay? That is not an accessible document for someone to read online, okay? So think about that when you are working on your websites. You have to make sure they're ADA compliant. On the left-hand side is our timeline. It's not so creative and pretty, but it's accessible. So we have to be very, very observant and keep that in the forefront of our minds when we are inviting people to look at our websites and our technology. All right, okay. This is our website. We have an accessibility page, and this is a great page. It's full of facts, documents, and it's accessible. And if people can go on that, and we're very proud of our accessibility page. Okay, so before we even go out and we embrace people to come into our programs, we want to make sure we're ready for them, all right? So if you have a dedicated office or not to help with those modifications or accommodations, how do you do that? So these are actual pictures of folks who at Cabin John Ice Rink, there's a support staff, we call support staff or companion there with folks who need some assistance. In the middle, we have our day camp. There's a support staff or companion with the child. On the right, you'll see there is staff there with a person who is using adaptive equipment. And those folks, you can make those. If you have ice rinks, you can actually make those out of PVC piping. And people who need those for assistance, they can actually use them. Okay, you can make them, PVC piping, and you can make different heights for children who are small, people with small stature, and then adults. And people who are even starting out in skating can use them. It's a skate aid, and they're very, very popular, and they're needed, and they're used a lot to help people on their first day of skating. And our goal is to wean them off the skate aid. So that's a really good inclusive goal. So starting from the beginning, how do I reach out to people, and how do I know they need a modification? So the next slide will show you what to do. So when people register for a program or an activity, they go on our website and we ask them, they need an ADA accommodation. And if they do, they will actually sign up and say, yes, I need an accommodation or a modification, and there's a drop down what they need. That report is sent to our inclusion specialist, which is Jen. And Jen actually reaches out to that parent or that individual, and we ask them to fill out this intake form. And this is really, really important because it gives us an overview on the individual coming to our program. This is a confidential form. And when we get the form, we share it only with the people who need to know. It's the director of the program or the instructor, and we have it. And if it's a support staff that's going out to support someone, they get it too. So this is our intake form, and we'll be happy to share these with you. We have them online. Prince George's County has it. Montgomery Recreation has them. St. Mary's has intake forms. So we're happy to share any of this with you all. All right. So this is how we start with the modification. That's for the program part. Let's talk a little bit about accessibility. How are we ready for folks with disabilities to come to our facilities and sites? How are we going to welcome them if they can't get to our facilities? We want to have a really big event over here at the farm, but we can't get into the farm because it's all gravel. A wheelchair can't get in there. Oh, well, how do we make that accessible? Thinking about that in your programs before you even start. How does everyone come in and feel welcome? So what we've done and what we have and what you can get through grants and working with local jurisdictions that have these kind of equipment are adaptive equipment. So what you see on the corner on the left is called Access on Wheels. Access on Wheels is a trailer. In that trailer, there is many different ways that we can use different adaptive equipment that we use for events. So in the trailer, we have mobility mats, which you see on the lower right corner. They're called mobility mats. Their Moby mats is the trade name for them. We purchased them. They're in that trailer, as well as there's a canopy in that trailer for a sensory retreat. So when you go out to events, they put the canopy up, and if folks need to have a relaxation time, it's a retreat for folks who need to have a calming station. There's also risers in there, accessible risers. And in that trailer is brought to the event. The event coordinators put all this accessibility needs down. They erect them, they put them in, and we're now ready for this event. We also have an accessible shuttle cart. Those of you can get this from golf companies. Diversified Golf Cart is where we got ours. Prince George's has one. There's a ramp that comes down, and so people with different mobility issues can go up on them with their companions. It seats 6 people. We use them at our big events and big fairs. We also use them for people who may have breathing issues or asthma, which is a disability. We also, I was driving the cart one day at one of our big events, and a woman was 8.5 months pregnant. So I stopped the cart and I said, "Do you need a ride? How can we help you?" And we always ask first. She goes, "Oh my gosh, yes." And so she hopped on. So it works out for a lot of different kind of scenarios. So think about this kind of things when you are actually doing your programs and trying to make them accessible. Now you say, "Well, I don't have money for this. I don't have funding for this." You can always apply for different grants. You can ask local jurisdictions that may have these if you can use them. You know, so think about that and partnering with different local jurisdictions that may have these if they're allowed to do that. Another thing that we do that we love is we have adaptive equipment that we have purchased and we put them at different facilities. So for an example, we have adaptive tees at our golf range. So people can actually come and not bend over, and it's easy for them to, it's elevated and the ball comes out. It's easy for them to play golf and swing. Adaptive fishing, the fishing rod at boat ramps. We have an accessible boat ramp that we got from a grant and working with a very great agency with the Veterans Association. And we got this ramp put in. So we have archery equipment that's adaptive, and we got these through grants as well as fighting with our local officials, elected officials, and advocating for these needs. It makes everybody really happy to be in our parks and included. This is the guide, our adaptive equipment guide. It tells everybody who wants to see this trifold brochure what we have at the different parks, and then they can actually use them. So in different locations, you'll see what the item is, where it's located, the description of it, the contact to get the equipment, and the details for reserving. So when people go to, let's say they go over to one of our Black Hill is a great park and they want to fish, they can actually go up to the boat dock and get the adaptive fishing equipment. And there's Fishing Has No Boundaries is a great, great agency and a nonprofit that has different kinds of adaptive equipment that you can use and work with them on getting those types of things. Another thing that we do is inclusive programs. So you'll see here, these are all different programs that we have, and Jennai Blakely and her committee do a lot of inclusive programs within the county. So you'll see on the left, there's an autism event at one of our barns. In the middle is the autism event too, with a group that we collaborated with. On the right is our Active Aging Week, that we have a lot of different events throughout that whole week. That's one of our commissioners walking the trail. So we also have a community mural program that we're starting as an inclusive mural design that we're doing in one of our parks. We have accessible community gardens and container gardens, and we have the different kinds of adaptive equipment we use for those gardens. And we have sensory trails that we're developing now, and they're not hard to do. It's working with the park managers and working with the nature center staff and other officials who can help you towards your goal. And there's so many grants and there's so many agencies and organizations that can help fund those. And we can help you with those too. A lot of us right now are doing virtual programs. We have virtual programs too. We have fun shops, we call them fun shops. And we send out the fun kits with different craft ideas and different sensory driven projects for our participants to engage in while they're home, with the intent of saying, hey, we miss you, come back, we'll see you soon. Does it keep that connection with them? And these sensory driven events are great. And when we go on, and Jen and Janine have gone on and had a fun shop with them with their crafts. So if there's that connection there, so keep that in mind too. We're also collaborating with our park managers and our park police. We have a park police division, both Prince George's and Montgomery both do. And we are working with our park police officers and giving them sensory bags. And in those bags are manipulatives. So when we give them to our park police, when they go out on a call and they don't know if there's a child who has disability in that home or in that park, they bring that bag with them, and that they notice that a child needs to be calmed down, they hand them manipulatives. So this is a really great program that we're starting with our park police.
My name is Genevieve Jennai, and I'm going to be taking over the last portion of this presentation. So we're going to have some quick fun. So this is going to be kind of interactive, so you can feel free to keep your mics unmuted if you feel like shouting out. For the first activity, I will need someone to be a participant in. So does anybody want to give it a try?
I got you, Jen.
Thanks, Corey.
I was gonna let somebody else go, but then it got quiet, so it's like, all right, fine.
All right, Corey, looking at this next slide, say the color and not the word.
Oh, read this one. Green, red, blue, yellow, blue, black, red, blue, green, black, red, yellow, green, blue, black, blue, red, green.
Great job. I thought you were going to go south with the purple one.
I got messed up there for a minute. I did. I had to pause and like regroup.
So this is just showing you how you have conflicts between your left and your right side of your brain, because while you're thinking, hey, that says yellow, the artistic side of your brain is saying, nope, it's green. So that conflict, it insists on reading that word the right way. All right, the next one, anybody can, chime in, but count the black dots. Do you notice how you see the black dots out of the corner of your eye, and then you go to focus on it to count it, and then it disappears? Just another thing of your mind playing tricks on you, right? And this next one is one of my favorites. Be prepared. If you look at this picture, it's not animated, I can tell you ahead of time. Your eyes are making this actual picture move. And if you don't believe me, focus on one of the black dots for a while, and you'll see it'll slowly make the circling come to a halt. If you shift your eyes at all, it'll start moving again. Anybody see it stop moving? So the whole purpose of this is just to show you how, like, you can sometimes, have simulated of having a disability and not even know it. So here, this is just showing how your brain conflicts inside of your head and how often this can happen when you either notice it or not. So let's talk about some disabilities, okay? You have a slight idea about seeing things differently, and let's talk about the abilities of people and how to keep people of different abilities included in all of our programs. So, quick question for you, and you can shout out and answer. How many people in the United States have a disability? Anyone?
Lots.
Lots.
Millions?
Millions, yep.
Millions.
61 million to be precise of the latest count from the CDC. So just looking at this little infographic, this is from the CDC as of September 2020, so it is pretty recent information. You can see the largest percentage of adults with a disability fall under mobility disabilities, and it could be whether it's permanent or episodic. As mentioned in the previous slide, physical disabilities include those that are present from birth, right? They're referred to as congenital, if you want to be technical, or they can be episodic, which occur as a result of injury or due to muscular dystrophy, cerebral palsy, an amputation, multiple sclerosis, pulmonary disease, or some kind of heart disease. And some persons may also experience non-visible disabilities, so those ones that you don't see. And they may include respiratory disorders, epilepsy, maybe someone's blind or deaf of hard of hearing, and you can't actually see those disabilities in the person themselves. So some of the characteristics include growth and skeletal abnormalities, which are caused by genetics or hormones, or even sometimes due to poor absorption of food, especially in like some other countries where food is very difficult to come by. The most common of these types of characteristics is achondroplasia, which is a type of dwarfism in which a child's arms and legs are short in proportion to his or her body. And sometimes their head may be larger and their trunk of their body is completely normal sized. Okay. P.S. We do not refer to these people as dwarfs. Let's go back to Marybeth's person first language, and we can call them people of short stature. And if you happen to watch the TV show, they do refer to themselves as little people. Some strategies for including individuals with physical disabilities is to advance plan. Planning is crucial ahead of time because you want to make sure that all of the necessary items you have are available. If you're going on a field trip, you want to make sure a venue is accessible. Okay. When you're writing your class description, make sure that it is as descriptive as possible. We once had a program that had walking as part of the program, and it was walking for a mile, and someone signed up and they did have a heart condition. And when they went out as a group for the walk, instead of being 45 minutes turned into about a 2-hour walk because they had to keep stopping for this one person to, catch up and stop and catch their breath. So just be mindful of things like that when you're writing your program descriptions. So the field trips, again, make sure the venue is accessible, that there's a walking route that we mentioned before, rest stops, access to the activities that are going to be part of that field trip, okay? And seating arrangements. You want to make sure that someone is always feeling included, and be aware that you may or may not have to provide a wheelchair or walker. So make sure that there's room either on your bus or the transportation. The last one is adaptive equipment use, and this next slide is going to show you. Here are some examples of adaptive equipment that can be used to assist people in your programs to be more successful. So if you look at all these, some of them are great. This adaptive fishing, I know Marybeth mentioned before about their adaptive fishing program, I believe, and we are paired up with Fishing Knows No Boundaries, and they're great, like small 401c. I don't remember the terminology, but they have been gracious enough to work with us and, assist us with our fishing rodeo. Another thing is the automatic tee up. We do have that at one of our facilities. Ice sledding we don't have it, but we do look forward to maybe one day having it. But this is just another kind of adaptation you can make for an ice skating facility. Beach wheelchairs, I do know that Prince George's County uses these, and Marybeth mentioned the access mats before. Wheelchair tennis is another one. And then beep baseball. If you look at that picture, it's someone who's wearing a blindfold. So this just shows that it's not just for people who are blind or have low vision. It's for everyone to play and feel included. So this is the interactive part. So like I said, you can unmute your mics and take part. What's the number of adults unable to walk a quarter of a mile? Anybody want to guess?
60%.
60%? Very high. It's 17.2 million or 5.4%. But good try. What about the percentage of adults who have a disability before retirement? This one's higher percentage, just to let you know. Anybody want to take a guess at that one?
30%.
What'd you say?
30.
30? Very close. So it's 1 in every 4. So it's 25%, which means 1 in everybody on this call, and every 4 people on this call will at some point have a disability before retirement. Not to scare you, just letting you know. Does anybody know what the leading cause of disability in the US is?
Obesity.
Obesity. Yeah, I would think I would fall into that category as well, but it's not. It's arthritis. So there are people of all ages that have arthritis. And if you think of it, more and more sports are pushing their kids to the limits, where the point where they're hurt but they still continue to play, and parents are just as guilty, right? So there are kids that are in, you know, the local rheumatoid arthritis companies and doctors' offices that are as young as 7 years old. So keep that in mind when you're kind of pushing those kids. If they're really hurt, give them that chance to rest so their bodies can recover. And then here's another quick fact. Nearly half of all adults with disabilities do not participate in aerobic physical activity. So this is where you, as recreators, come in to get them involved. And this next slide is one of the slides just to show famous people have disabilities too. So does anybody know who these people are? Recognize? So starting from the top right, top left, I'm sorry, is Stephen Hawking. He had ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease. Okay, Christopher Reeve, I'm sure you all know this, he's Superman. In 1995, he was paralyzed after a horse riding accident. The next one is Teddy Pendergrass. He was a singer. He was paralyzed in a car accident. Franklin D. Roosevelt, he was our 32nd president and he had polio. And then if you don't know her, soul surfer Bethany Hamilton, who lost her arm after a shark attack. And one of the things is when I've taught younger folks in customer service, they were like, oh, she had a kid? Like, yes, just because you lost your arm doesn't mean you lost your ability to have children. So that kind of struck me as like, wow, look at the way people are thinking, right? So we'll talk a little bit about developmental disabilities. So do you think all people with a developmental disability have Down syndrome? The answer is no. No. It is right. It's a common misconception. Developmental disability is why the little picture of the umbrellas is there, is an umbrella term that includes intellectual disability, but also includes other disabilities that are apparent during childhood. Okay. Parts of these and examples are epilepsy, cerebral palsy, fetal alcohol syndrome, and specific learning disabilities and other things. Okay. Developmental disabilities can have an effect on your cognition, the way you think, and the physical body, or both of these aspects together. For example, someone with Down syndrome often will have physical distinctions and lower intellectual ability. And just know developmental disabilities usually appear before age 18 and are likely to be lifelong. Intellectual disabilities encompasses the cognitive part of overall developmental disabilities. They're sometimes referred to as IDD, and they're grouped together in different organizations. So you may see it one way in education and another in recreation, but it pretty much limits to a person's ability to learn at an expected level and function in daily life. Common characteristics of intellectual disabilities are difficulty learning and processing information, problems with abstract thought, and problems with social interactions, which occur at varying levels due to that individual. Intellectual functioning is reasoning, learning, and problem solving, and your significant limitations in adaptive behaviors. Does anybody know what an adaptive behavior is? So it's the ability to adapt and carry on everyday life activities such as self-care, socializing, and communicating. So common causes occur due to injury, disease, or problems within your brain, problems during pregnancy or at the time of birth. For instance, if a mother has a health problem such as whooping cough, measles, or meningitis, which are very rare but still heard of today. Head injuries, stroke, or certain infections, and exposures to environmental toxins such as lead or mercury. So a person who has Down syndrome is a person born with an extra chromosome, which is also known as trisomy 21. And this is an extra copy which changes the way the baby's brain and body develop. Common characteristics are seen here as your face are flattened, especially at the bridge of the nose. Eyes are more almond shaped and slant upwards. Ears may be smaller or flat and set lower. Most of the time your ears are kind of, symmetrical with your nose. Sometimes they sit lower. Your neck is shorter than normal. hands and feet are smaller than average, and there may be poor muscle tone and shorter stature than others. There are some health concerns when you are coming across and working with someone with Down syndrome. There is a higher incident of visual problems, okay? They may be cross-eyed or have near or farsightedness, so you'll see them either wearing very thick glasses or maybe goggles that are glasses because they have to keep them on their heads for a better sight. They have a higher risk of hearing loss due to the middle ear problems that they could develop. Their speech motor difficulties have area of their brain that organizes speech and moving their muscles. They may have issues with that. There's something that's known as atlantoaxial instability, and it's a misalignment of the top two vertebrae in your neck. So this is really important when you're planning physical activity. They may not be able to participate in contact sports or do any kind of strenuous exercise. And just so you kind of know, some of the symptoms of that atlantoaxial instability is a change in the way they walk. If they get tired easily while they're walking, pain or numbness or tingling in the neck, shoulders, arms, or legs, their head may tilt to one side. They may have trouble holding their neck up or moving it, and weakness in the arms and legs, and they could even have problems with loss of bladder control. A third of them have heart defects. However, today they're largely correctable, and there is a tendency toward obesity with age due to a lower resting metabolic rate than other people. Be aware of some of these possible concerns, such as short-term memory. They do self-talk a lot, which helps them coordinate actions and their thoughts. So if they're talking to themselves, it's pretty normal. And potential. And this one actually is for you, because it is up to you to not underestimate that person's potential and the person themselves and what they can do. Some strategies to work with people is to teach new tasks in a step-by-step manner and repeat them as often as needed. Give frequent reinforcement and consistent feedback. Use visual instructions and demonstrations to compensate for short-term memory. So if anybody has, short instructions up on the wall, hopefully they're short, like 1 to 5 steps. You can put pictures next to them that you can get right off of the internet as a visual demonstration. And it's not just helpful for that individual who has a disability, but it's helpful for everybody. Think about that. Like if you look in elementary schools, they have an analog clock with a digital clock, and then it's written out right next to it about how it's said, because all children need to learn, right? So this is just a quick activity that you can do to include everybody. When I say wellness, offer healthy snacks, okay? And when you're thinking of, again, the atlantoaxial instability, try not to give them strenuous exercise. Also being aware that behavior plans may be necessary. Give positive feedback often, even something as simple as a sticker, just to hand out. Just give it to them at short intervals so they keep getting that motivation to continue behaving well and doing that right thing. So here's some more interactive stuff. Developmental disability finish line. What is the life expectancy of someone with Down syndrome back in 1983? Anyone have a guess?
15?
Something?
30 years.
35. 35. Okay, the answer is 25. So the person who said 25, great job. What about the life expectancy today?
60.
50.
60. Awesome. And what do you think? There are over how many thousand people living with Down syndrome in the United States?
110,000.
110, 600. It's 400,000. Okay. And we did talk a little bit about causes of developmental disabilities. More than how many causes have been discovered? What do you think? All right, I'll tell you. More than 250 different causes of developmental disabilities have been discovered. So the most well-known causes are maternal infections during pregnancy, right? Possibly fetal alcohol syndrome, RH factor, which is where the mother's blood and the baby's blood don't mix well. And what other abnormalities, which is the most observed cause? What's that word I'm missing there?
Chromosomal.
Chromosomal. Awesome. Okay. So now we're going to go into our next disability and pay attention to this next video. Okay, can anyone take a guess about what disability this is simulating? Autism, great. So autism spectrum disorders, ASD, that's exactly what it was. Great job. So they fall under the category of developmental disabilities as well. Please know that there are no two people on the spectrum that have the same characteristics. It is not a condition or a disease, okay? It is defined as a neurological disorder, and it affects sensory integration, which includes all the senses, including the sense of touch, which is otherwise known as tactile, your sense of balance, which is vestibular, and your sense of your body in space, which is proprioceptive. It also affects communication. The person could find it hard to relate to others and communicate with them in a kind of weird way. When I was working earlier in my years, I had a participant who his mom drove a Prius, and he would always come up to you. And the first thing he would say is, "Hey, do you have a Prius?" And if you said no, he wanted nothing to do with you. But if you said yes, he would get you into this conversation about the Prius. I mean, he knew everything about that car, the ins and outs, all the colors that came in, the type of motors, everything. So like that was his way of communicating with someone at his level. So what do I mean by spectrum? This is the spectrum, and it includes extreme ability in some areas down to severe learning disabilities. And if you notice, there's a little box over here, and if I remove it, the word Asperger's is there. And Asperger's is a term that's still used today, but it's no longer qualifies in the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistician's Manual, the 5th version, which is actually used by the American Psychiatry Association as a tool as the principal authority of psychiatric diagnosis. So this is just to show the extreme of how one, is able to function. This next slide is showing some of the characteristics specific to that person. Of course, like I said, not one person shares the same characteristics. So it could be one person has some of them, one person has all of them, maybe one has none of them, So at the bottom here, I'm only saying this because it's going to move in a little bit, but they can walk on tiptoes. They like to wear same shoes. And if you keep looking, bring it up for you to be able to see it. But some of them may have smells. I had a child who used to come up and just hug because they needed that pressure. So these are all different characteristics that they have. And of course, this is not an exhaustive list. There's a whole bunch of other things that can be characteristics, but these are just some that you can just see right away. So some of the strategies: simplify your language, avoid using metaphors and sarcasm because they will take everything you say literally. Don't rely on facial expressions to convey your meaning when you're speaking to someone. If you are yelling at them and your face tends to get mean looking with your eyebrows slanted in and that scowl on your face, they may start laughing because they don't understand some facial expressions. And this is not everybody, but it's some of them. So just don't rely on your facial expressions, okay? And use simple language. allow that person to use coping strategies of their own. Some of those things could be self-stimming and soothing, sitting there and like scratching themselves. Some people have seen that some children with autism have head banging tendencies. And as long as it's not in a harmful way, allow them to do it, because that's the way they're coping. If you try to stop it, you could incite even further behavior from them. Like I said, give, instruction one at a time. Okay. Model appropriate social interaction. Initiate conversation with them using a variety of topics. Maintain those topics with them and redirect them if they come off topic to keep them involved appropriately in that social interaction. Another thing is to use visual cue cards. Again, you can get those offline. And then this last thing is a social story. And on this next slide, here's an example that I found of 2 pages out of a social story that is about preventing the spread of COVID. And notice how it has specific pictures with a very simple sentence explaining what's going on in that picture so that person can understand what is going on. And that's a social story. So here's the next, match it up. Anybody want to tell me what they think the rate of ASD in boys is? A, B, E, F, obviously. E, you think? Okay. Anybody else?
A.
Wait, so the answer is B. It is 1 in 34. It's actually a higher incident in boys than there is in girls. And then the rate of ASD in children is, I'll give you this one, 1 in 54. What about the average additional yearly cost for a family with a child with ASD? Now this is on top of what it costs for a child who does not have a disability, okay? Like just think, your regular diapers and things like that. If you have a child who has autism, what do you think the estimated additional yearly spent is? 60 or 17?
60.
It's actually been averaged out to 17. But that's still a large number on top of what I know what I spend on my kids every year. So, and then the last one is the rate of ASD in girls. You only have 2 things to choose from.
1 in 69.
144.
It is 144. It's very big difference between boys and girls with autism. And just for a fun fact, the rate of ASD in Maryland is 1 out of every 50. So it's actually higher in Maryland than it is for the nationwide average. Okay, this next slide. Famous people to be known on the spectrum, and in clockwise order, it's Dan Aykroyd, which you probably know that look from Ghostbusters if you've seen the original movie. And then the top is the Miss America contestant, Alexis Weinman. She was Miss America a couple of years ago. Then we have Albert Einstein, who a lot of people believed had ASD. Then Vincent D'Onofrio, he's been on a lot of SVU and I think it's Full Metal Jacket. He's been in a whole bunch of movies. He's a pretty good actor. And then another actress that many people probably don't see these days, but Daryl Hannah. So we're going into our last disability, and that's ADHD, or attention deficit. Hyperactivity is in parentheses because it doesn't always have to be hyperactivity disorder. And it's marked by an ongoing pattern of inattention or hyperactivity, impulsivity that interferes with functioning or development. So there's inattention, which means the person can wander off, they lack persistence, they have difficulty sustaining focus, they're disorganized, and they're not due to defiance or lack of comprehension. Just know it's something they can't control. And the hyperactivity, obviously they're hyper, they're excessively fidgeting, they may talk when it's not appropriate to talk, they tap. In adults, they may be extremely restless or wearing people out because they're just constantly on the go. And then impulsivity is when the person makes hasty decisions without thinking about the repercussions afterwards. And they could have a potential for harm to either themselves or another person. They may have that desire to get that immediate, feedback and rewards, right? And they could be socially intrusive and interrupt people's conversations, and they can't make those really important decisions without considering long-term effects. And so the behavioral part is aggression. You'll see excitability, fidgeting, hyperactivity, impulsivity, irritability, lack of constraint, or persistent repetition of words or actions. When you're looking at the cognitive part of ADHD, it's absent-mindedness, difficulty focusing, forgetfulness, problems paying attention, short attention span. And then you look at the mood part of it, and that's where they're giving out anger. They're anxious. A lot of people with ADHD have, anxiety along with it. They show boredom and excitement at extreme levels, and they can have mood swings. It does not mean that they are bipolar, but it is easy for them to switch moods. Something I wanted to just share with you, since we're in the recreation field, there are sports kind of physical activity benefits for people with ADHD, of course, but please be aware that kids with ADHD may want to skip those directions and jump right into the game. So they're going to be the ones that are just gonna be like, all right, let's go, let's play. They're not going to wait for you to sit and talk through the whole rules of the game. They're going to act on instinct rather than remember the rules of the game and use strategies to actually win. They're going to have difficulty waiting their turn. So anytime you have children lined up waiting to maybe kick the ball, that one with ADHD, maybe, off goofing around, not paying attention and engaging other kids in things they're not supposed to be doing. They could daydream or fool around if they're not actively engaged. And some of them will display temper tantrums, rage, and other inappropriate or physically aggressive behaviors. So just be on the lookout, because if they're not winning, they're going to get so upset and display that, and it could be harmful towards others. And it'll make them look, like something's wrong with them, but just be aware of that. It may not be them, it's the ADHD, that they can't control it. Just remember, reward them. And here's some of the strategies. Schedule downtime. Anything you're doing, just have maybe like 5 minutes in the schedule where there's just a time to rest. Give fewer consistent rules. This can apply to everyone. Establish a routine, whether it's a day-to-day routine, an hourly routine. Make sure that, we talked about the schedule. You can put up with the pictures. That helps them to know what's going. Sometimes, and I have 2 children with ADHD and have it myself, but putting a visual schedule with a picture, and it actually helps you go, oh yeah, I have to go do that. Provide tactile stimuli, hands-on. I have all these things around my desk to play with to keep me, stimulated while I'm working on my computer. Physical proximity. Remember about when you were younger in grade school and your teacher would walk by, and as soon as they get near you, you automatically freeze and stop what you're doing. Keep within that physical safe distance. Give them special jobs. I remember when I was younger, I used to love being the one that delivered the letters to the teachers next door, or passing out everybody's papers, because it kept me involved and feeling like I was important. So that's a big thing for kids with ADHD. Keep activity levels high and plan, and make sure that you're rewarding. And again, on the bottom, reward with special activities or privileges rather than food. Food's a big mistake, especially if it's candy, which I shouldn't really say because I usually hand it out a lot, but candy will get them even more excited. So here's the last interactive game, and this is, let me know if you think yay or nay. The following are known to cause ADHD. So this first picture on the top left is pesticides. What do you think? Yay or nay? Does it cause ADHD?
Yay.
Yay. All right. Research does suggest a possible link between ADHD and pesticides. In 2010, there was a study that found children with higher urine levels of organophosphate, which is a pesticide used on produce, did have higher incidences of ADHD. What about sugar? Yay or nay?
Yay.
Nope. Sugar is often blamed for a child's hyperactive behavior, but it's time to stop it. A study in the Journal of Abnormal Child Psychology found mothers who thought their children were given sugar rated their children's behaviors as more hyperactive than mothers who were told they were given sugar substitute, regardless of whether their children actually consume the real sugar. So sugar does not cause ADHD, but it can make them hyper, just as it can make anyone else hyper, but beware of the come down after effects. Okay, this next picture is not very clear, but it is like lead paint and it's cracked and all. What do you think? Yay or nay?
Yes.
It is. It's a neurotoxin. It's been removed from most homes and schools as of today, but there are still traces of it everywhere. And in 2009, there was a study specific about ADHD levels that have higher blood lead levels with children who have ADHD. What about a brain injury? So it is possible for it to call ADHD depending on the area of the brain that's traumatized, like a blow to the head or a brain tumor that appears or stroke, or it leads to poor regulation and of your motor activity and impulses and causes inattention. So it is a possibility. This next one here is the kid with the kind of chromosome DNA link coming out. It's genetics. What do you think?
Yes.
Right. A child with ADHD is 4 times as likely to have a relative who also has ADHD. So for me, I carried it on to both of my children. My mother has it, my aunt has it, and I'm sure if I go back further in the gene line, more people do too. Okay. Results from studies of multiple twins even show that ADHD specifically runs in families within the twins, right? And the evidence suggests that ADHD is passed down from parents and not this next one, which is, and no, that's not Trump, parenting style does not cause ADHD. Okay. What about this next one, gaming?
No.
Thank goodness, right? There's no proof too much TV or video game time causes ADHD, although there has been research that's found that school and college age children who spent more time in front of a screen had more attention problems than those who did not. And this last one, smoking and drinking while pregnant. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Fetal exposure to alcohol and tobacco is thought to play a role. Children exposed to tobacco smoke prenatally are 2.4 times as likely to have ADHD as those who are not. So there's also about the fact that some people think preservatives that are given to their kids in their food actually cause ADHD. And there have been a lot of bans in European countries for those preservatives that are found in foods because they've found that it does link to hyperactivity. But the FDA, good old FDA, says that food additives are safe when used properly. So just keep that in mind. And then this is one of my favorite slides. These are famous people to have been known to have ADHD. Justin Timberlake straight up in the middle, Will Smith, Adam Levine, Channing Tatum, and Michael Phelps. I know you ladies out there appreciate the slide. And then we'll come to our final thought. So not a label, not a word, not a derogatory term you heard. I'm a who, same as you. Do you have a name? Me too. I'm a mind, a heart, a personality. I'm an equal part of the overall we. Who am I? I'm simply me, a person, not a disability. Thank you all for coming and joining us for this hour and a half. Sorry, we're a little bit over. I tried to keep it as fast as I could, hence why I talked. But that's it. Anybody have any questions they have?
I know there's a couple of people who asked for a list of some of the adaptive equipment items that we have and where we've got them and how you can get them through grants or that kind of, those kind of resources. And we'll send those to Adrienne and she can send those out. But if you have any questions or you want us to come and speak to, if you don't have a dedicated office that does inclusion or TR, or if you want to reach out to us or any of your local jurisdictions that does have a dedicated office, please reach out to them and they can help you. Prince George's, St. Mary's, Montgomery Recreation, Montgomery Parks. So anyone, if you have any questions, City of Greenbelt, let us know, and then we can also always help you. All right.
Thank you, Marybeth and Jen. Awesome training today. We appreciate it. And thank you to our attendees for your attention and participation in today's webinar. Following today's session, you will receive an online evaluation. Please complete this information as it assists us with providing training and educational content that are relevant to you and your organizations. If you haven't done so already, please visit the MRPA website and register to attend upcoming training sessions. We have on March 4th and the 25th, Experience Design for the Recreation and Event Professional. Our speaker, Annie Brusoli, will be finishing up her series on those dates. And then please also join us for trainings that are being offered by our partners featuring the Montgomery Parks Take Care of Yourself, Montgomery Parks Take Care of Yourself series, giving effective feedback in personal or work situations on March 10th, staying engaged and advancing your career as a remote employee, April 28th, civility in the workplace on May 5th, and the impact of attitude on work and life on June 23rd. Thanks again for joining us and have a wonderful rest of your week.